name's Mark Pegram. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Lancaster University and our company, Sanitas Data Security, and I hope it will become clear the relationship between the two as we go through the presentation. My colleague Mike Watkins is here. He'll be joining the question and answer discussion. Our other colleague Rick Derbyshire unfortunately can't be with us. He's actually he's pretty quite glad he can't be with us. He's actually in Boston at the moment. He's won a scholarship on behalf of the university for a 2-week course at the Babson Entrepreneurship College. So we wish him well in his absence and hoping he's bringing lots of good knowledge back to us how to grow this business. And myself, Mark Pegram. I think between us we've got well over 40 years of experience in sort of IT, security, defence across a number of domains, and our sort of common bond was that we all joined the MSc Cybersecurity programme at Lancaster University in October last year. So we are still students. We're due to finish in September this year. Dan Prince, in his previous role, was the course director of that course. One of the modules that we did was with Mark Lacey, Security and Conflict in the Digital Age. And that was when we really were asked to come across this future scenario plan that Mark's already described in the introduction, whereby basically we were asked to come up with a sort of a spectacular cyber event that could potentially happen in sort of the timescale of around 2019, which was an interesting time in terms of forecasting. I think Bill Gates is quoted as saying that, you know, we're rubbish at predicting what technology is going to do in 2 years' time because it never happens that quickly, but we're also rubbish at predicting what's going to happen in 10 years' time because it usually happens a bit quicker than we thought it was going to be. So, I don't know, who knows, 7 years we might be about right. We actually chose healthcare for our scenario. There had been some elements of the press that had been talking about vulnerabilities in specific devices, which we'll come on to later. So we thought, well, let's understand what's happening in the world of healthcare. Let's understand what's happening to be predicted in the world of healthcare in sort of 2019, 2020 timescales, and work up a scenario around that. I think few people argue that healthcare today is expensive. The figures there in terms of the growth in expenditure in real terms, but also the amount it takes of the public purse. 17% of government spending is actually spent on healthcare. The only larger chunk of money is set towards pensions, which brings us to the other issue of sort of demographics and how this problem's potentially going to get a lot worse for the country in terms of, you know, an increased overall life expectancy, therefore more people putting a burden on the pension funds and not actually contributing to pension funds, and also an overall increased life expectancy aligned with more chronic conditions, which means people are going to need more long-term care. Example there on lifestyle diseases. Big problem in terms of obesity. 1.6 billion adults overweight or obese across the world. 50% of adults in the US and Europe are in that category. Diabetes often linked to lifestyle. Approximately 350 million people in the world with diabetes, and the costs of treating that and managing that expected to balloon. So we had a look around at what's happening, and obviously, in a time of austerity and constrained budgets, I think governments around the world do recognise this problem. Industry around the world is recognising this problem and sort of trying to come up with potential solutions. But the general picture we picked up was that healthcare is moving to a much more home and community-based solution model, rather than having people having prolonged stays in hospitals. I think we can probably all relate to that. But it's also becoming much more personalised, much more self-managed. So the idea is to put tools and equipment in the hands of the patients themselves to manage their disease and condition. Also becoming increasingly, as is the rest of the world, much more internet enabled, and that can help with things like diagnostics, treatment planning, even managing sort of dose control, stock control with sort of automatic links from the medication back to the prescription ordering service. And increasingly a big area in health is sort of health informatics. So once you start collecting all this data and interconnecting it, if you can actually group that together and analyse it, then obviously that can be very powerful in terms of doing specific research into the causes and how best to treat certain conditions. Although we were looking ahead to 2019, when we looked out there, it is already happening. 17,000 healthcare apps in the iPhone Apple Store. 60% of those are aimed directly at users, which points towards the sort of the personalised, self-managed aspect of it. And embedded devices, so some devices that can actually attach to the body and control bodily functions or monitor critical bodily functions, have wireless connectivity. And as soon as you mention the word wireless to an IT security person, they start getting a bit twitchy usually, because that tends to be the most vulnerable. The device on screen is actually an existing product. It's actually a blood pressure monitor. So plugs into your smartphone, takes your blood pressure readings through the day, and obviously that data is then available. You can send it to your GP or your healthcare provider, and also analyse trends. Again, IT security risks are already apparent. The Semantic report for 2011 quoted that 43% of data breaches were actually related to healthcare. That's actually more than the next three combined, which are government, education and the finance industry. So not a great track record in sort of managing the governance of their information. A McAfee researcher demonstrated the ability to remote control implanted in insulin pumps. So this is actually a device that puts insulin directly into the bloodstream. It'll take 3 days worth of dose, and what the researcher actually demonstrated was that he could scan, find where any of these devices were actually transmitting, and then remotely take those devices over. So he could switch all the alarms off and put 3 days worth of insulin into the bloodstream at the same time. Imagine if you time that so that when they're asleep, it's a pretty effective way of killing somebody. An American professor, Professor Kevin Fu, has also demonstrated and published vulnerabilities related to pacemaker devices. And when you bear in mind that they have defibrillators built in these days, again, you could actually remotely control that and cause serious harm, kill somebody again. When we started thinking about how healthcare is moving, we started thinking that there's a couple of potential multipliers here. There's a lot of drive to research more ways of using technology to reduce the costs of healthcare. The pace of that technology change, if you think where we were sort of 10 years ago in terms of how big laptops were and what they could do to now what you can do on your smartphone. That is making more and more functionality available in smaller and smaller devices, affordably all around the world, and people seem to be rushing to put that wireless connectivity in, and there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of thought being put into the risks and how that might be secured. So, we think this is a significant issue. I think cyber assassination is actually possible now. And although we've looked at two very specific, obviously health critical devices in terms of the insulin pump and the pacemaker, if you think about it, even a passive monitoring device, if that's tampered with, could be fatal because somebody could adjust the doses of their medication accordingly. Promote that forward so that everything's interconnected, then a hacker could maliciously control a family of devices. So I think we worked out there was something like 300,000 insulin-dependent diabetics in the UK. If you had a family of devices that were being used by even 10% of those by 2019, somebody gets in and maliciously controls a family of those by putting in a malicious firmware update, or if they're, worse still, if they're directly connected to the internet, could control them all instantly. You could have a cyber equivalent of a 9/11 event. Literally thousands of people dying. Other attacks, obviously possible. If you just wanted to target the NHS, then all sorts of things. Hack into prescription records, delete patient records, hack into your local community nurse and find out where all the controlled drugs are in your district. There's endless endless possibilities there. Now, lack of security awareness, an opportunity and a threat. I mean, that's coming from us trying to form a company to work in this space. We think it's definitely needed, but how do we get listened to? The providers themselves, pretty slow to acknowledge what the security risks are. In the case of that insulin pump, the first person to actually demonstrate a vulnerability was actually an insulin-dependent diabetic himself. He actually had one of the pumps, and he was roundly criticised and discredited by the manufacturers, saying, well, firstly, who'd want to attack a healthcare product anyway? And secondly, you only could get into it because you knew the serial number on the back. Well, I think the McAfee research after that demonstrated you didn't need prior knowledge of that information. Also, because we're talking about small mobile devices and even applications on a phone, a lot of the providers of this kit and this technology are going to be increasingly small and medium enterprises. And again, traditionally in the security space, they're the ones who think the least about the issues, because everyone thinks, oh, it's the it's the big guys who get hacked because that's where the money is. The government certainly doing a lot to drive the innovation and the technology. There's the Wellcome Healthcare Innovation Challenge Fund being run by the Department of Health. But we can't find any promotion of a requirement for IT security. Mobile devices or medical devices in the UK are actually regulated by an organisation called RA, who are the UK body set up to make sure that any medical device manufactured in the UK and sold within the European community has the appropriate CE quality stamp. Again, nothing in there specifically mentions IT security. Obviously, the government, £650 million cybersecurity funds. From what we can see, most of that's gone to the MOD, the Secret Services, and big business. Even when you look at what's being done to protect the critical national infrastructure, healthcare rarely, if ever, gets a mention. It's what happens if the power grid gets attacked, or what happens if the water supply gets attacked, what happens if the transport systems are attacked. No one seems to be worrying about what happens if the healthcare system is attacked. So I think that concludes the presentation. There will be a Q&A session after. Thank you.